So today I'm going to make a new shelf. I'm kind of running out of space in my shop, and I often need spots to dry material as the finish is drying. So what I'm making today is just a shelf. It's not designed to carry a lot of weight, but just to be able to have a lot of shelves and a lot of storage. I'm going to be replacing this guy right here. It's just constantly overloaded, and it's not really big enough for what I need.
I'm gonna start with the legs here. I'm gonna mark it out at 6 feet and make the cut. If you notice, I'm looking down the board, and what I'm looking for is any twists or bends or curves. I checked these at the store, so most of these are pretty good, but every once in a while you'll see a little bit at the end, and if it is at the end, I wanna make sure that's the end I'm cutting off. Next, I'm gonna mark where the shelves are gonna be, so it's gonna be every 6 inches, and then I'm gonna mark a second and third line, 3/16 of an inch on either side of that center line. Now as I cut it, the width of the blade's gonna add a little bit to it. So even though I am cutting out 3/8, as I go down the line, the thickness of the blade will actually take a hair bit more. So there should be a little bit of playroom. The shelving I'm using is 3/8 plywood, so I'm hoping for a little less than 1/2 inch gap. Okay, so you could have done this with the dado stack if you had one. I don't have one, so I just made 3 cuts and I'm using a chisel to clean it out. It's pretty simple. I designed this build to be very easy and approachable, so realistically you can do this whole build with a circular saw and probably a drill. I did use a chop saw and I did have an impact drill, so I did use those 2 things. But if you don't have those, don't let that deter you. Here I'm cutting the pieces that are going to span the depth of the shelf. So I want the shelf to be 20 inches deep, and since each board is a 2x4, which is really 3.5 by 1.5 inches, I need to take off 1.5 inches for each board. So since there's 2 boards, it's 3 inches that I'm going to be taking off, and since I went in at 20 inches, I'm going to cut these at 17. Luckily, I was moving a shelf over, and then I realized that I should make sure the shelf actually fits in all my cuts. So I'm realigning all the boards, and when I had taken them down, I rearranged them so the cuts weren't lined up, which actually played in my favor. It kind of highlighted any crooked spots, and I was able to straighten them out. Here I'm just gonna fasten this with some screws. I'm gonna hold my speed square to the board just to make sure that they stay perpendicular. Make sure it's nice and square. Also, it's always a good idea to pre-drill your holes. It just keeps the wood from splitting.
So I'm about halfway through my build, and I'm liking the way it's coming out. As you can see, I got it notched about every 6 inches. This can be really useful for me. I can have a lot of shelves. The other nice thing about it is, it's an ice cream truck. If I need bigger shelves at any point, I can just take off, like I'm just gonna have 2x4s going across here, and then down here, we'll just have 2x4s. So if anytime I want bigger shelves, swap out the 2x4s and make it bigger, and we're good to go. I'm just using really thin 3/8 plywood, really kind of flimsy stuff. So the bigger it is, the more flimsy it is. So probably just gonna keep it to about 24 inches. I am gonna make one alteration. I'm gonna move these boards, these holes. This guy, I'm gonna recess it in a little bit and actually put a little wall with some holes in it so you can put a bunch of spray paint cans in there, and it'll hold it because I'm always using a bunch of spray paint. But other than that, it's coming along good.
So one thing I missed out on the recording was me cutting up the plywood. I got a 4x8 sheet of 3/8 plywood from Home Depot and just had them cut it into 2-foot strips when I was there, and I was able to get 8 shelves out of it total, and I used a scrap for some other failed attempts, as you'll see in just a minute. Originally, I was just overthinking this shelf for the spray paint cans, and I didn't have a hole saw, so I was wasting a lot of time, basically, is what I was doing. But as you see, you can overthink things pretty quick. So I didn't like the way that one looked, and I moved on to the plywood and cut these down into strips, and thought maybe I can use a table saw and notch it all out, and maybe it would look cool, hoping. But as you can see, it just didn't come out good, and I overlooked a simple solution, as you'll see at the very end, of how I support the spray paint cans. So after wasting a good half a day, I realized I could just use some 2x4s and sandwich them in, and they hold them nice and tight. And this is the finished product. Thanks guys, had a blast making this. I appreciate the support. Follow us on Facebook, check out our Instagram, and stay tuned for more.